Hey everyone! My name is Cheyenne. Thank you so much for joining us today. This whole month, we're going to be looking at a group of stories in the Bible from the book of Genesis. We put together a video to help set up what we're going to be talking about, so let's check it out. The first book of the Bible is a book called Genesis, and it's jam-packed with some pretty crazy and amazing stories. Some of the most famous stories in all of the Bible are found here. We see God doing incredible things, and we see people are kind of being the worst. For example, we see God being all awesome and making everything amazing. Then we see people going their own way. Then God is awesome again, and people are hurting each other. Then God's good again, and you guessed it, people, they're people. This cycle just continues all throughout the book of Genesis. God does something awesome, and people fail.
Oh.
Then God does something awesome again, and people fail. Obviously, God wasn't doing sweet flips, but still, God is being good and kind, and people just keep messing things up. What is going on here? The Bible is showing us the huge difference between God and us. God is great and awesome and loving, and people keep going their own way.
Come on.
So the Bible is laying out that as people, we have a huge problem and we need a rescuer. But it's okay, because God thought that through too, because He's awesome. Even though we humans can be a little less than awesome. And that's what we're talking about. Today we're going to be talking about a story found in Genesis chapter 3 about when sin entered the world. Sin is a big deal to God, and even though it may look good to us, sin is always a trap. Through God's Spirit living inside of us, we have the power to overcome that trap. That's why today we're saying, every day I make choices that honor Jesus. We're going to take some time right now to watch a Bible story together. Like I said before, today we're going to be looking at the story of when sin entered the world. Let's check it out.
In the beginning, God created everything. He made the bright sun to shine during the day and the mysterious moon to glow at night. He shaped the earth with his bare hands. He covered its surface with glistening waters. He caused towering mountains to sprout from the ground and then laid a bed of soft grass across the land. He made the graceful birds in the sky and the colorful fish in the sea. Everything God made was perfect, but not everything was created equal. His best and most favorite of all was his last creation, Adam and Eve. And because God loved them so much, He made a special home just for them, a place called the Garden of Eden. Everything on earth was perfect, but perfection wouldn't last forever. As they were walking together in the garden one evening, God said to Adam, "Do you see all of these trees in the garden? I made them just for you. You can eat from any tree that you choose, except one. There's a tree in the middle of the garden that I don't want you to eat from, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you choose to eat its fruit, then you will surely die." God had a wicked enemy named Satan. Satan hated God and wanted to destroy everything that God loved, especially Adam and Eve. He knew of God's one rule and saw a perfect opportunity to trick them. So one day, as Eve was taking a walk in the garden, Satan, disguised as a snake, slithered up to Eve and quietly whispered in her ear, "Did God really say you mustn't eat from any tree in the garden?" Eve quickly replied, "No, we may eat from the trees, just not from the tree in the middle of the garden. If we eat from that tree, we will die." The clever serpent hissed back, "Surely you will not die. God knows that if you eat from it, your eyes will be open to see good and evil. With just one bite, you will know everything and be just like Him." Satan's tricky words consumed Eve's heart. She thought, Just one little bite won't hurt anyone, right? It's just one piece of fruit. If God really does love me, then why wouldn't he want me to have it? Eve reached out toward the tree and snatched the fruit from the branch, and then, hesitantly, she opened her mouth and took a bite. To her surprise, she did not die. In fact, the fruit was good to taste, so she took it to her husband. Adam knew in his heart he should not do it, but he chose to disobey God, and he ate the forbidden fruit. The very moment Adam took a bite of the fruit, everything changed. Suddenly the air felt dark and heavy, and there was an odd clenching in Adam's chest. Adam and Eve both felt something that they had never felt before. They felt wrong. They knew that they had just sinned against God, and for the first time in their lives, they were afraid of what would happen next, and worst of all, they were afraid of God. Later that day, God came to spend time with them, like he did every day. When he didn't find them, he cried out, "Adam, where are you?" Adam nervously replied, "We heard you coming and we got scared, so we hid in the bushes." God knew exactly what had happened, so he asked, "Adam, have you eaten from the tree I told you not to eat from?" Adam cried out, "It was her," pointing his finger at Eve. She made me do it." God turned to Eve. "What is this that you have done, Eve?" She replied, The snake made me do it." God's heart was broken. He knew that his perfect creation was no longer perfect. He knew they would feel hurt, they would feel fear, and eventually they would even die. With great pain in his heart, God cast Adam and Eve out of the garden, and they would never be able to walk with him on the earth again. When Adam disobeyed God, he brought sin into the world. Along with sin came fear, sadness, pain, sickness, and ultimately death. But that's not the end of the story. Thankfully, God had a plan to fix the awful mess that Adam had made. One man messed it all up, but through God's plan, one man would fix everything.
Adam and Eve fell into the trap that Satan put in front of them. They chose to go their own way instead of God's way, and that sin changed everything. But God is so amazing because immediately he had a plan to fix everything. Our friend Pastor Cameron is going to be talking to us a little bit more about our story right now, so let's take a look.
How many of you know what this is? Right, it's a mouse trap. Well, this is a rat trap, but same concept. The way a rat trap works is you pull this metal bar back, you click this pin into place, then you place a little bit of cheese on it for bait. Then you stick it where you know a pesky old rat's gonna be. Now, when the rat sees this piece of cheese, he gets so focused on the cheese that he doesn't even notice the trap that he's stepping right into until it's too late. This is pretty much the same thing that happened to Adam and Eve, except it should have been a little bit more obvious because God told them it was a trap. In Genesis 2:17, God said, "When you eat from it," it being the tree that they weren't supposed to eat from, "you will certainly die." Seems like a pretty easy choice, right? Even still, the serpent came and tempted them, and they ate the fruit. What? This was clearly a trap, but these rats get so focused on the cheese that they walk right into it. And the serpent actually did a pretty good job framing this up as a good idea. He was all, "Hey, Eve, over here. Yeah, I know, talking snakes, pretty crazy, right? Hey, listen, all you have to do is eat fruit from this tree and you'll be like God." So Eve had a choice to make. She could trust that God knew what was best for her, or she could eat a piece of fruit and be like God. We all know which decision she chose. Probably seemed like a good idea at the time, but that one decision that Adam and Eve made to go their own way instead of God's way wrecked everything. What a ridiculous decision. There was an obvious right choice, but they made the wrong one. And some of us may think, I would never have done what Adam and Eve did. Even if it did seem like a good idea, it was obviously a bad choice. But we do this all the time. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a screenshot of a video that I'm about to show you. Clearly, a bad choice was made. So let's start by looking at the first of the video, shall we? This all started with an idea that was clearly a bad choice. I should do a double backflip off of this high bar. Obviously a bad idea, right? And I'm sure he knew that. But then this guy thinks another thought. He thought, you know what would be awesome? If I could actually land this double backflip, Spider-Man style, and then post it on YouTube for all the world to see. Or in other words, this seems like a good idea, let's do it. So he went and made the wrong choice, like we see here. We make wrong choices all the time that we know are wrong before we choose them. That's why the Bible has a verse in it that says, I've set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. Not only does God give an obvious choice, but to be extra clear, he gives us the answer too. Why does he do this? Because he knows that we get focused on the cheese. That thing that seems like a good idea at the time, but ultimately is nothing more than turning our back on God. It's called sin. Sin is when we choose to go our way instead of God's way. When we say, God, I know what you say, but I'm going to choose this anyway. And when we look back on the sin, we see that it was clearly a terrible choice, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. We just got so focused on what we wanted that we didn't care that we were stepping right into a trap. So, just like the rat, we see something that we know is wrong, then we do it anyway, and then we die. But just like in our story, dying doesn't always mean physical death. When Adam and Eve died, they were still living physically, but they were separated from God. You see, that's what sin does. It separates us from God, our source of life. We read Deuteronomy 30:19 a little bit ago, but I want to read a little bit more of it right now. It says, I've set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. Then it goes on to say, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life. If the Lord is our life, and we choose to go our own way instead of his way, then we choose death, because sin separates us from our life. This is why we say that sin is a trap, because the cost of sin is death. But God knew that we would choose to go our own way instead of his way, so he had a plan. He would send his own son, Jesus, to live a life free from sin. Then, Jesus would willingly place himself into the trap that we found ourselves in and die in our place, paying the price for our sin. He paid the price so that we wouldn't have to. Now we don't have to be separated from God because we sinned. That sin was paid for. Now we can have a relationship with him. Not only that, but when we follow Jesus, we get to have his spirit living on the inside of us. And that spirit gives us the power to live like Jesus lived, free from sin. With God's spirit living inside of us, we have the power to make choices that honor Jesus. And even if that cheese does look good, we don't have to walk into the trap of sin anymore.
No matter how appealing it may look at the time, sin is always a trap because sin separates us from God, who is our source of life spiritually. And we have all sinned, so we were all separated. But lucky for us, God sent Jesus to make a way to reconnect us to our source of life. God is so good, and he loves us so much. Our response should be to show our love for him by making choices that honor him. So what's one choice that you will make this week to show honor to Jesus? I would encourage you to talk with your family about that question. Then, don't stop there. Whatever you talked about, make sure you do it this week. Remember, every day we should make choices that honor Jesus. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.